Hello, I'm Robert Lomas, and this is the fourth of 17 episodes of a work called 10 Nights in the Black Lion, which was written by the novelist Daniel Owen in 1859. It was originally written as a serial in a magazine called Charles Bala, which was produced by his friend Nathaniel Jones. This is the fourth episode, and it was published on April the 23rd, 1859. Episode 4, The Second Evening. I'd been so concerned about the callousness of the people I'd seen in the bar room that while I was eating I wondered how they were getting on and what effect the pub was having on them. After supper I went into the bar room to discover just how the regulars were spending their evening. The bar room soon filled up. The business had grown a lot over the past year, but the sight of so many young people coming in and drinking eagerly really upset me. Ha, I thought, who really knows what devastation a pub causes in a neighbourhood? A pious and serious old man came in as I was taking a seat. I saw from his expression that he was upset. Distress was clearly printed on his face, his head was bowed in sorrow, and his cheeks were wet with the tears of old age. I was shocked when the local men acted in a mean and rude manner to this respectable old man. The drunkenness in the pub seemed to have robbed them of all respect and honourable feelings. Even men with few of mankind's virtues are still polite to an elderly gentleman, but these followers of the old serpent didn't respect this incomer, not in this pub. No, no, no. They had been stripped of all their merits and become devilish souls and cursed spirits. I watched as the man came in and looked around the room. He was obviously searching for someone. The eyes of the regulars turned towards one young man playing dominoes with a friend at the far end of the room. Finally the old man spotted him. In a voice melting with sadness and distress he called out his name, "Edward!" The young man started as he recognised that voice calling him, but he didn't answer. "Edward, my son," the old man repeated. Edward wasn't hardened to such an extent that his father's concerned tone no longer had the power to reach him. He quickly got to his feet and left with his father. "I'll tell you what," said a boy who had been talking with Edward. "If that old man made a fool of himself like that with me, coming to chase me down at the pub, he'd get trouble for his pain. I'd like to see him try. That's when he'd find what trouble really is. I wouldn't go with him like a lamb, that I wouldn't." The boy could not yet have been 20. "Who is that man?" I asked him. "His name is Mr. Hargrove." "And was that his son who went with him?" "Yes, and I wish there weren't such humiliation scenes like that happening here." "How old is Edward?" "About 20. "Oh, so he's still only young?" "He's old enough to be his own master." "The law says differently," I said. The young man decided to ignore the rule of law and the age of majority and sidestep the issue. "Well," he said, "I admit that Edward Hargreave doesn't show the best of sense when he's allowed to go where he wants and do anything he fancies. No, I won't deny that. But what harm is there in a game of dominoes? We were only playing for fun, we weren't gambling." I pointed to the half-empty glass of beer that Hargrove had left behind. "Therein lies the worst danger," I said. "If it were just a few beers and a game of dominoes, it wouldn't matter so much. But it won't stop there. I think Edward Hargrove's father did well to take him home." "But you don't know Mr. Hargreave that well," said a man of about 40 who was sitting beside the youth. "I remember him when he was Edward's age, and he was a big lump of a boy. He wouldn't stop at 1 or 2 or even 10 drinks. I saw him blind drunk many times, and just as many times at the horse races and cockfights. I was only a child then, but I can tell you old Hargreave was no saint." "And I'm not surprised he's worried about his son," I said. "He knows far more about the dangers than his son does." "I don't see it did the old man much harm. He enjoyed the pleasures of his youth. Then he got married and started a business and got on well. Why shouldn't he let his son have the same fun? No, he's not behaving properly, sir. It's a shame that old Ned Hargrove doesn't have more sense and just stay home and mind his own business." "I'd do for my old man if he came here to look for me like that, I'm sure," said another supporter of the murderous views of the domino player. "Your old man knows better than to try that," confirmed yet another. "He'd like to, though. Tried a couple of times, but I showed him his stupidity." Then I heard Simon Slade's voice booming out across the room. "Listen here, Joe Morgan," he said. "Just you look at me." I hadn't noticed Morgan come in. He was standing at the bar, an empty glass in his hand. I don't know what he'd said to upset Slade, but the innkeeper's eyes were blazing in his head and his face was aflame with anger. Joe didn't seem bothered and was determined to confront him. He stared right back. "Go away, I say again. Never more show your face here. A plague on you and your kind if you ever come near me. If you can't behave decently, stay away, I tell you." "A publican talking about politeness? Ha ha!" Joe Morgan laughed. "Pooh-bah! You were once a simple, decent man, and a good miller too, but that time has gone. When you became a publican, you lost every ounce of true decency. That's neat, very neat. How can you talk about decency, man? Do you think selling beer is more decent than drinking it?" Slade was quite drunk, and when Morgan spoke out so bluntly, he lost his temper. He grabbed an empty glass and threw it as hard as he could at Joe Morgan's head, but the glass missed. It skimmed past Joe, across the bar, and just at that moment, a child came through the door of the pub. The flying glass hit her full in the face. The child let out a deadly scream and fell to the floor. Everyone in the room gasped with shock. "That's Joe Morgan's child. He's killed her. Great heavens!" came a chorus round the bar. I was the first to reach the girl as she lay by the door. The glass had hit her forehead and she was bleeding badly. I lifted her into my arms. Morgan stood beside me, stunned, not knowing what to do. "What's the matter? Oh, what's the matter?" I heard Mrs. Slade call out. I could hear the fear in her voice. "Nothing, nothing. Go back in the house, Anne. Go!" the innkeeper shouted. But she was not to be put off so easily. She'd heard a child screaming and hurried to see who'd been hurt. She was not going to go away. As soon as she saw the child, she ordered Frank to go for Dr. Green. "Oh, what a shocking wound the child has!" she cried. Frank came out from behind the counter to do what his mother had said, but his father stopped him. On seeing her husband obstructing him, Mrs. Slade sharply ordered Frank to do as she told him. Her voice was as hard as a smack with a wild thorn bush. "Run, you dirty rascal!" Harvey Green chipped in. "If you don't get a move on, the child will die before the doctor gets here." Frank didn't wait any longer. He ran past his drunken father to fetch the doctor. "Oh, you poor little thing," Mrs. Slade said, taking the child from me. "How did this happen? Who hit you?" "Who? No one other than Simon Slade killed her," Joe Morgan shouted, clenching his fists in anger. Mrs. Slade gave her husband a reproachful, grievous look that I'll never forget, as she realised what he'd just done. "Oh, Simon, Simon, has it come down to this now?" she said. What kind of thinking was behind that phrase now, I thought. Ha! How fast was her family sinking to the bottom of adversity and loss. "Fetch water and a cloth for me this minute," ordered Mrs. Slade. Water was brought, and she washed the blood from the child's face and stopped the bleeding from the gash. But the poor child lay slumped like a dead body. The doctor arrived and stitched the wound. As he was putting in a last stitch, I heard another woman scream out in the street. Joe Morgan's wife burst into the house. Her face was as white as lime, her eyes were shining wildly, and tumult and agony were ripping her apart. "Joe, Joe, what's the matter? How is Mary? Has he killed her?" came her agitated demands. "No, Fanny," Joe Morgan said, getting up off his knees from beside his child and going to his wife. "She's better now. She's had some bad luck, but the doctor says there's no real danger. Oh, my dear girl." The blood drained from Fanny Morgan's face, making it even paler. Her breath failed, and she fell into her husband's arms in a dead faint. What fear and shame drunkenness causes! How different would the situation of these two creatures in the depth of woe and destruction be if there were no drink, It's the drink which disrupts the gentle and easy-going Mrs. Morgan as she recalls the happiness of the morning of her life. All Welsh women will do well to remember the bitter fate that awaits a drunkard's wife. Mrs. Morgan soon recovered from her faint and embraced her child. Joe Morgan left with his daughter in his arms and his wife beside him. This was not the first time I'd seen that girl come to fetch her father when he was late coming home. I later discovered that she never went to bed until she brought her father safe back to the house. After they had left, I went back to the bar-room to ask Simon Slade how he felt now. "It's been very unfortunate here tonight," he said. "I'm angry with myself, and I'm sorry for the child. But she had no business coming here, and Joe Morgan's impossible with me. He'd drive a saint to violence. Oh, I so wish this argument would stop. No one wants it. Oh, my dear old friends." That's the end of the 4th episode of 10 Nights in the Black Lion, written by Daniel Owen. It was first published in the magazine Charles of Bala on April the 23rd, 1859. I'm Robert Lomas, and I spent the last year translating this. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then please click the subscribe box in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen.